Hey everybody, we're Bev Live. I'm Brett.
And I'm Bjoern.
That's Bjoern, and we're here with our weekly live stream as promised. So hope everyone's having a great week. I know Bjoern, you just came back from a pretty cool trade show, so I know everyone's dying to hear about it. So tell us a little bit about that and what you did, and maybe if people don't even know those kind of events exist, what happens? What's the trade secrets that happen?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, right? I mean, what most people are not aware of, there's importers, there's distributors, there's retailers.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting fact, actually, most people probably don't know that retailers in outside of California cannot buy directly from the wineries, for example. So they have these trade shows where producers present their wines and spirits, and then you have retailers and distributors and sometimes importers walk the floor and taste lots of product.
Wow. So how many wineries or representatives show up to these kind of things?
Well, it depends. I mean, there are some shows where you have like 100 to 150, so those were the smaller ones.
Okay.
But then if you go to Europe especially, you go to some shows, they're absolutely massive. I mean, you'll be blown away.
Hundreds or?
No, like thousands.
Thousands. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Thousands.
Yeah, thousands of wineries. I mean, like literally. And like from some countries they have, like there's a show in Germany called Wine, which is probably the largest. And they have 50,000 trade visitors in 3 days.
That is, I can't even imagine that. That is incomprehensible almost.
Massive.
In one space. And they're
space.
all from all over Europe, right? I mean,
the world.
The world. Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
all over the world.
All over the world.
Wow. Yeah, that would be probably a long day then, drinking wine with all those vendors.
You start at 10 in the morning and,
That's right. So
you need a beer at the end.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. So you're done with a lot of water, I'm sure. So is there anyone particularly interesting you met or any cool connection that you made up there or no?
Well, we talked to some very, very interesting people overall. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing that I saw overall, it wasn't just one specific person, but it was a lot of producers from all over the world. And the one thing most of them had in common is, how do I get to the consumer? And that was really, really the hard thing for them. They come to this country from all over the world, go to these trade shows, and they really don't understand how the U.S. system works. And so they try to find a way, how do I get to the consumer? And the U.S. is not easy. So you have, there's what's called a 3-tier system. And that was put into place after Prohibition.
Oh my God! So dating all the way back then.
Yeah, dating all the way back then, and so it gave states, for one, the right to have their own spirits laws and liquor laws, but it also put the 3-tier system into play, which means wineries need to sell to a distributor, who then sells to a retailer, who then sells to the consumer.
Okay, that is a bit to keep up with.
Yeah. And the only other way is for the wineries to sell directly to the consumer. That's how you bypass it.
Wow.
And that's kind of where I guess our business model comes in, where we're trying to help wineries to sell directly to the
and even then, that's tricky, right? That's no easy feat. So.
Well, you got to find the people to come to your winery. That's why I think that's why you need a space like Bev Live, where everybody kind of gets together. It's kind of like a marketplace, right? I mean, if that's actually not a bad way to put it. Let's say you are a producer of, I don't know, pickles, and you want to sell to lots of pickle-loving people.
I'm a pickle producer.
A pickle producer, and you start your stand on the side of the road and hope that people are going to drive by, right?
Okay.
Right.
They made a movie about this with Seth Rogen.
Or you go to the weekly market, where people go anyway. Like you have your weekly market, and you got your lettuce, you got your carrots, and whatever else, and then you have your pickle stand. And then you have that built-in audience that goes to that market every week, every Saturday morning or whatever it may be.
Okay.
And you, as the pickle producer, are probably going to sell a lot more pickles than you do on the side of the road, standing somewhere hoping somebody will stop.
That makes sense,
right? And that's, I guess, in some ways our business model, as you know, at Bev Live.
Yeah. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I know everybody's wondering, like, what in the heck is in front of them? So let's pretend, I'm not nearly as experienced of a wine drinker, someone like yourself, but that's okay. And a lot of people, I would say, aren't. But there's a concept of wine aeration, right? And so this is actually a gift that I got one Christmas that I had, and same with this.
Yeah, this is kind of like pretty hilarious.
Yeah. So let's talk about, first of all, why aerate wine anyway?
Why aerate wine? So this this thing's funny. Why aerate wine is you have tannins in wine, and for those of you who do not know what tannins are, don't do this, but think of it as putting a tea bag on your tongue. Oh. And the dryness that you get in your tongue, that's tannins.
Okay.
So it's not very pleasant, but that's kind of like the best way to describe tannins in wine. It's the dry stuff that provides somewhat structure also in a glass of wine. Otherwise, it tastes like.
So that may be why a lot of novice wine drinkers, they don't like the deeper red wines right off the bat.
Exactly. They like the easier going wines, like wines that are not as tannic.
Okay.
But if you have like really nice wines, you open them and they're almost undrinkable at first because they need oxygen. They need what the wine people call to breathe. And that's where the decanters come in, because you pour your wine into the decanter, and it usually has like a big opening and a big surface, so the wine can breathe.
Okay.
And that's the idea of decanters. So this thing is kind of counterproductive here because there's no big surfaces, maybe down here, but the air doesn't really get in. So
it looks like it's made to attach straight.
Right,
and then pour it out in that direction.
This looks more like something like something fancy like not fancy, but something a restaurant wants to do when they want to sell you a glass of wine or something.
Okay, it's about the aesthetic, the look of it, rather than the function.
And an easy way to give somebody one drink, I guess, one glass of wine.
And so this one, I feel like. Kind of the concept you talked about, keeping it in an open container for a while so it can breathe. This sort of speeds up the process, I'd imagine. Might not be able to tell from the viewers at home, but you could see there's a bit of an insert there. It goes into this kind of cone shape and then right into the glass. So it's made to be poured right over in the center.
And those things work. So what I haven't mentioned is so basically the air comes in and it breaks up the tannins, and so the wine will be more enjoyable to drink in. But in general, we're talking about more high-end wines, like big wines that just need some air. So one thing I mentioned too is you're a foodie, and like if you go to the nice restaurants and they have a nice wine list, please don't order your fancy Bordeaux or whatever it may be as you're there, because it will not have enough time to breathe properly.
Okay.
So call in the morning.
Good. Wow.
Have the wine list. Okay. Call and say, I want this wine. Here's my credit card.
Okay. And on that note, we have we got a question from a viewer. So user Defunk asked, how long should you keep the wine open before drinking it to let it breathe enough? But is there an amount of time? Does it depend? How do you know that?
It depends on the wine. I mean, some wines you just you pop the cork and you go ahead and drink it right away.
What kind of wines would that be? How do you know? Is it a style?
It's not necessarily a style, but I think usually like the less expensive wines do.
So it won't do it any favors by dressing it up a little. It doesn't matter.
Not too much. I mean, it does help. I mean, aerators, for example, do help even with less expensive wines. But if you have then the higher end wines and you want to let it breathe, I would say an hour is probably
okay. An hour.
Yep, give it some time.
That's it. Defunk 1 hour.
But I mean, if you have something really nice, like I mentioned, like you would call the restaurant, the nice steakhouse or whatever it may be. They open the bottle, let's say at 10 o'clock in the morning or at noon. Put it in a decanter, and when you get there, it's perfect.
Okay.
But don't spend $1,000 on a nice bottle of wine when you get there, or try to impress your boss or something, because it's going to be a complete waste.
Oh, is that I guess the more expensive wines typically they're aged longer. Is that why that kind of alcohol tends to really build up in there in that process?
Well, it's not the alcohol; it's just the tannins.
So that makes sense. It can kind of give that effect of, I don't know what you want to call it. I don't want to say acidity. That's probably not correct, but a similar burn to the tongue.
Well, it's just like the fruit doesn't come out. Is the thing. The wine is not. the wine is not what it can be.
So the nuances
it's
are
kind of
lost.
like, it's kind of hidden. It's kind of like, you have this let's say you're cooking, right? And you have this great paella. And like you have all the aromas of paella, the whole house could smell, but you cover it as you're maybe cooking something to make sure it cooks through.
Sure, yeah.
But so all the aromas do not get out of your frying pan or whatever pan you're using, and it's covered. That's what tannins are. They basically sit on top of the fruit, and they don't let the beautiful, delicious, fruit aromas kind of come out. They're covering it. So the more oxygen that comes in contact with the wine, the more the fruit aromas and everything else will come out.
Wow.
And so if you go to your fancy steakhouse again, and you get this basically this nice wine, and it's all the tannins are all sitting on top of the fruit, you're not going to enjoy it. It's gonna be horrible.
Okay, that is a great way to explain it, and I've never personally thought about it that way, and that's so. Is that why I've seen kind of these pro wine drinkers at these high-end bars, and they'll swirl the glass like that? Is that the same kind of reason?
You're getting some air into it.
So
that's
let's mix it up, get the
some people
tannins
make
out.
Sounds as they drink it. My wife does not appreciate when I do that.
It's like the gurgling of the
you don't do that.
I've seen that.
But that's it. You got oxygen into the wine. That's what it's all for.
Well, let's give it a sip.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite good. I see what you mean. Yeah, we kind of let that, because we've had this open for a little bit before we started the stream, in full disclosure, so we let it breathe, and you really taste that fruit flavor coming out. I really like that.
When you have guests come over, make sure you open, to that question again, make sure you open it like an hour in advance and leave you a nice bottle and have it ready to go.
Great. Yeah, so let's get these distractions out of the way, shall we? But let's talk about kind of shifting gears, Bev Lives. We've had some interesting thoughts about content, I would say, over the last few days.
Right.
Some inspiration for some very great mentors we've had, and I had the pleasure of speaking with so many of them in this past week or two. You want to talk a little bit about that, maybe kind of what we might have cooking up here soon?
Yeah, we really want to bring the winery experience to everybody's home. I think that's really what defines the company. That defines what we're trying to do here at Bev Live. And one of those things is, some people have never been to wine country. There's only so many people who can afford to fly out to Napa or wherever, and especially not to another country. Mm-hmm. But, what we are planning right now is to have cameras installed in some of the world's leading wine areas, so that people can just tune in on Bev Live and, watch and kind of be part of, the winery world, be part of those special areas, and watch them 24/7.
And the wineries do have those areas, right? Because they have typically visitors all the time. They have a curated experience for you, so you're not going to walk acres and acres of land necessarily, but they do have the sort of the viewing area, I call it, the actual where they grow the crop, and then the tasting room, and maybe some of them I've been to. They have restaurants and everything too, really nice establishments. But what I love about those because they are beautiful settings. Think of our friends in Australia who showed us their amazing properties. It's just incredible. I feel like it's looking at a different planet almost that most people will never see. Right. But I know these places are great for having all kind of events, like weddings that are particularly popular. So imagine watching that live stream, watching the camera, just tuning in randomly and seeing a wedding and being a part of that. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
That would be really, really cool.
And that's how I think about it too, because when I was growing up, I did a lot of skiing and snowboarding, and that push for that type of camera, I was just beginning to see that when I was a teenager, and but it was kind of cool because you could go and look at the slope conditions of that day and see exactly what you were. It's useful if you live in an area like in Colorado.
Some nice powder snow for
yes. So it's like I always joked, because if I lived in Colorado or somewhere far northeast where they get a ton of snow most of the year for skiing conditions, here's that first big snow. I'm sick. I can't come to gotta call out and hit the fresh powder.
Probably not the only one.
Yeah, and the camera idea is just interesting because there's so many different directions you could go with it. It's not just maybe passively viewing, although that is great, but I think that opens the doors for events, being a part of it, like you mentioned, and you're not just a spectator
and
anymore.
you're not just going to, let's say, a supermarket or something, picking wine off the shelf. I think you're immerse yourself. Immersion, I think, is the word here.
Immersion.
Like, be part of something. And we, the more I think content we can provide, the more we can bring the vineyard to somebody's home.
Sure.
Talking about that, I mean, we saw a presentation yesterday on something.
Speaking of immersive experiences,
we saw some presentations yesterday where companies were using virtual reality and augmented reality.
And that was crazy. I mean, there's some brilliant people out there. Don't get me wrong, but I've never thought of how deep that rabbit hole could go. And
you're the software
yeah,
engineer.
I know. That's why I say that. It blew my mind. And to be fair, I do a different style of development, software development, which they were looking for someone like me because we need a full stack developer.
I know. I always thought of you.
But what was really cool about that whole panel was there wasn't a company behind that panel, obviously. Two of those speakers were from that, but then two of the other gentlemen, they were from companies in town. So it was that's really neat. And then even these just, I won't say average, but pretty common, contracting military companies in the town we live in, they find applications for that. So I can imagine the one that was interesting to me was the one about the hospital, and how you could be training on the person, but then also be the patient at the same time and get the simulation both ways. And that blew my mind.
Awesome. And I think to the use case of Bev Live, it's just basically having the winemaker in your living room, as a hologram, pretty much, or as part of your virtual reality experience.
And I think a lot of people think of that kind of virtual reality as strictly let's put on the bulky headset, and I think that kind of blew our minds. They totally proved that wrong.
I think we're way past that, and we asked the specialists, for companies like ours, when is the time to start investigating these possibilities? And the answer was
yesterday.
Now.
It's now. It's here. It's not as pricey as you would think. Because one of the people we were talking to told us, you don't. Because I thought personally you would need, say we want to do a VR of the scenery of the winery, and so I thought you'd have to sit out there with a camera for 24 hours, hit record, and then come back later, and then somehow digest that and be able to make it usable. But no, we found out that all you need is a smartphone,
take some pictures.
Take some really high quality photos, and they can superimpose them in different ways and make them look like a real setting that's actually moving in front of you. They added sound. It was very impressive.
So for those of you who are watching, let us know and get in contact with us. Let us know what you want to see.
I think that's why we bring it up. This is our ask to you as the viewers. What do you want to see on the platform? What is interesting to you? And because we know, there's some things that are obvious. I think education, exposure to new brands,
right.
But some things that are not. That like the live streaming of the winery or the virtual reality wine show.
Shout out to the mentor who came up with that because I think it's a brilliant idea.
Well, we can shout out. I don't think she'll mind.
So shout out to Donna. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. She's our program manager at Generator, and she's awesome and just been so much fun to work with. Right. And I love her enthusiasm. It's contagious. It's got me all worked up and excited, which not of my typical personality, I guess. I'm more the laid back, Bjoern's
the software engineer.
Yeah, exactly. The typical engineer. But I do love wine, and I love this podcast, which, by the way, we are coming out with a podcast soon. That's why I had a Freudian slip there. So if you can't make the live streams and maybe it is too much to sit down and watch one, look out for that soon because it'll be on every podcasting platform. They'll be available soon after, just like the videos in the archive, and you can keep in touch with us any way you want. But yeah, that's Bev Live. That's our weekly live stream. I think that's a great place to stop it. And hey, cheers.
Bye.
Bye.